Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first say that it is, a true honor to speak to you on the 10th anniversary of the Club of Amsterdam. Creating an unrestricted and free-thinking environment that is strictly focused on envisioning the future, whatever such future may be, was the concept of Felix Bob. It has produced in the past 10 years much original thought and free expression about feelings, ideas, definitions of preferred futures. We may not always agree with each other, but that was never the intent. Prolific discourse was. I'd like to thank Mr. Felix Bob at this point to provide us with this forum that is to this day free of any dogmatic guidance and political or corporate persuasion to brainstorm about these preferred futures. Anyone is allowed to speak, to present his or her views, even I. My talk today carries 1 minute before 12. That's the title. Actually, it's not 1 minute before 12. It is 10:55 p.m. And the date is April 10, 1912. We are in the northern part of the Atlantic en route to New York. We are on board of one of the most beautiful ships ever built. It's 1912 and global warming has not happened yet. So the sea is full of beautiful and scenic icebergs in the middle of April. But there's absolutely nothing to worry about. We are on the safest cruise liner ever built, the beautiful and majestic Titanic. Nevertheless, there's a tiny little fly in the ointment. We just struck one of these picturesque icebergs about 10:40, about 15 minutes ago. Some people come up from the engine room and they look like they ate a bad piece of fish. They say that there's a big hole in the lower part of the Titanic caused by one of these floating icebergs we just passed. You know what? To me, it sounds like the typical stuff that is coming from these blue-collar workers from the lower decks. They try to scare people. They're always the same. What would they know anyway? Sure enough, soon the first worry discussions start. Is the Titanic really as safe and unsinkable as they have told us by the White Star shipping line? Did these White Star people really think of everything? It's just the typical negative stuff that goes around just to be bumped into a little snowball. What's wrong with these people? I had dinner with the builders and designers of the Titanic last night. They told us we did not even need rescue boats. It's a total waste of money. Unnecessary, stupid, and totally outdated safety regulations. This nonsense is cutting seriously into the dividends of our shareholders. We should maximize profits by putting no safety boats on at all, but putting more first-class cabins instead. Yield is important, not costly red tape. We need profits, not unnecessary costly safety precautions. Everyone knows the ship is unsinkable. They should know. These guys last night at the dinner table, they built the ship. They are the experts. The potential sinking of our boat is just theory, just like global warming. It's not realistic. It's always these fearmongers amongst us that try to scare us. These experienced shipbuilders know what they are doing. They are not stupid. They have always thought about the worst case scenario. We can be sure because they told us so. You know what? Some of these paranoid disaster prophets, they think there's a systemic or even structural problem with the Titanic. Can you believe that? I always say follow the money. Look at all these rich people on the boat. Would they be on the boat if there were anything wrong or to worry about? Probably not. They do not make miscalculations with their own lives. As long as I see these fine gentlemen on the boat, I know I'm safe. Well, if this all sounds too familiar to you, then you got my point. And I'm apologizing for the dripping sarcasm, but sometimes it's appropriate. Today, we are not talking about a sinking ship in the Atlantic. Today, we are talking about the future of an entire planet. It is just like on the Titanic. There are too many people, not enough resources to save them. And when bad planning forces a disaster, who gets saved first? The guys with the deep pockets. And those that should manage the crisis, they are busy rearranging the Titanic deck chairs and polish the ballroom silver, even after understanding sets in that the boat will sink. We are doing exactly the same now. There are at least 20 to 30,000 well-informed people on this planet, maybe more, right at this moment, that know the severe global problems that are coming over the next 2 decades and need to be managed. But it's easier to hide behind polished indifference of academic and politically correct language than to come out and tell point blank what the story is. Yesterday, I read a scientist's assessment of rising ocean levels and how they are putting countries like Nauru at risk to disappear. Why at risk? Why not tell them what the date of expiration is? It's probably around 2035, 2045. Let's come out and tell them they need to move, find a new island, because that is the correct and honest answer. I like these modern optimists. I like to call them ignorists. Global warming? Just a myth. It's just a theory, no hard facts. People will always find automatically a solution to any problem. Well, here's some more of the slogans from the top 10 list of ignorance. We can overcome anything by positive thinking. Or conflict in society is good and necessary for humanity to evolve. I like that one a lot. Or this one, I think it came originally from a movie, but now it's circulating everywhere. Greed is good, greed is right, it's the very spirit of evolution. Here's one I read yesterday. Global problems? What problems? We only got to solve the fear of the future, not the problems. Great one. Well, for those who did not get it yet, what will happen globally between now and 2030, I suggest they look at the vital data and trends much more carefully. Look at these trends in its full context. Look at all elements of the global information and how these elements affect each other. Do your homework first and then participate in the discussion. Don't start out with an opinion and get the facts later. Get the facts first. For example, look at exponential change of all vital data. If you take the 100 most important indexes of global sustainability and you look at in what part of exponential change they are, whether they're on the early part or whether they're in that part where they're changing the curve into a vertical climb, then you will see that between 1950s and today, the amount of these indexes that are in the critical phase moved from about 20 then to over 90 now. That means all exponential changes, or almost all exponential changes, are reaching in the next 5 to 10 years absolutely critical values. Look at the fast dynamics in how the change of a recorded time period changes. Look at all contextual consequences. Don't look at just data. Look what the consequence of that change is and what that really means. Build an all-inclusive master model. Look carefully at vital areas like energy, food, water, natural resources, pollution, environment, economics, the financial and monetary system, and last but not least, the increasing willingness to engage in global conflicts. All of these elements work together. Look at all of this information with the scientific approach of an interconnected cause and effect model. You may be shocked when you see the final analysis. The fact is, the exponential changes in these 10 fields point to a world of challenges previously unknown. Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering new and uncharted territory here. And it happened between now and about 2030. Tonight, however, I don't want to talk much more about our potentially problematic global future. I've written much about this, and much has been circulated by others to the subjects. I'd like to refer to our last issue of the Club of Amsterdam journal from November 2012, where I published an extensive article about our global crisis between now and 2030. For those that like to familiarize themselves with the relevant research and forecasts, I also recommend to request from us a copy of our Global Trend Report 2012 to look at the data and the conclusions we draw from such a model in detail. Our latest report will be released by December 18, just in time to provide you with some interesting Christmas literature. However, if your nerves are weak, I recommend you read Charles Dickens. It may be much more comforting for the holidays, I suspect. Tonight, I would like to focus now on what we must do to change the course of these negative trends, because they can be changed. The world can be saved. We are not yet falling off the cliff. There is a lot we can do and a lot we can change. I like to focus on the potential solutions and on a way forwards to get out of these problems that we are in. I have summarized them in 10 vital modifications we must undertake to change our planet into something that some people would often call utopia. But just remember that utopia is always the next step of desired or necessary advancement which we have not yet achieved. When we couldn't fly, an airplane was utopia. When we didn't have a car was utopia. It was always the next thing that not yet has happened. We could envision it, we could imagine it, but we just haven't done it yet. So let's go after this utopia. So let's look at these 10 recommendations one by one. Each of them can be implemented today. We can argue on how the implementation of these recommendations should look like, but they are in any case a good starting point for a proper discussion, hopefully one we have later tonight. 1. We must recognize that the era of self-righteous decision-making by kings and presidents is over. The world has become too complex. Human intelligence is no longer adequate to govern or manage countries or to solve the global challenges of the future. We need extensive, real-time and parallel data and machine intelligence instead to make intelligent and sustainable decisions for the future. We as a society must begin to elect supercomputer programs instead of political leaders to manage this complex and fragile world. Number 2, the age of democracy must evolve into an age of consensus. Democracy is no longer adequate. Democracy is badly implemented and when under pressure produces dangerous polarizations instead of peaceful solutions and then collapses. We must move on to models of inclusive consensus where all of us participate and where decisions are made that are backed by an overwhelming majority of the participants. Number 3, we must plan exploitation and consumption of global resources in a global and cooperative context model. This begins by viewing our society as a single global society first, and not as many competing or even hostile regional societies. We need to share these resources in a sustainable way and with long-term perspectives to respect the needs of future generations as well. 4, we must develop a global and cooperative energy production model based on zero pollution or other negative environmental effects. I'm thinking here specifically on Fukushima and other problems that have occurred recently. These energy models must be sustainable for future generations. Today's mineral oil reserves must also serve the petrochemical needs of generations to come. We don't use crude oil just to burn it in cars. Crude oil is a very, very important substance that we need in medicine, in plastics, in materials, in all kinds of other areas. And we will need that for many generations to come forward. So we shouldn't burn it all up in cars. Number 5, we need to learn to look at all citizens of this globalized world as partners, not as exploitable resources. All humans must be equal everywhere, have true equal rights, not just legally or ethically, but also economically. People must be rewarded for labor and commercial contribution equally everywhere. This will also solve the so-called immigration problems. So why do we wonder that everyone wants to live here with us? Well, we just look into their country and see how they live. And then we should look at how much it is our fault that they live the way they do. Number 6, we need one single global currency to eradicate the effects of predatory speculative trading practices. The multi-currency system has produced detrimental conditions amongst many nations, especially those that are rich in resources but less developed otherwise. Number 7, we must urgently eradicate conflict among societies, begin to promote a model of tolerance and respectful coexistence. I know this sounds truly utopian, but it all begins with proper education. If we invest in education on how we can get along with each other, about 50% of the money that we are currently invest in weapons, then this problem will be solved. Conflict must end. We cannot afford it any longer. Not with 14 billion on this planet as is projected in just a couple decades from now. Number 8, we must properly manage the population, consumption, pollution matrix. Let me repeat this. We must properly manage the population, consumption, pollution matrix. We must go on the assumption that all citizens on this planet want to live eventually with more or less the same level of development, technological comfort, or similar consumption habits. This requires that these 3 dimensions be brought into a sustainable equilibrium. This is a big task for forward-thinking problem solvers and data crunchers, such as, for example, IBM scientists in the latest breed of blue gene supercomputers. I encourage their management and also universities such as MIT or the University of Shanghai to participate extensively in the finding of solutions to this particular problem matrix in a collaborative and in a global thinking approach. Number 9, solve global problems globally. Healthcare, drug addiction, security, energy production, waste management, or food production are all global issues. They require global thinking and global collaborative management. They require an interconnected, intelligent, and consistent approach to the problem. Number 10, last but not least, we don't need or ever want a global government. This would be a nightmarish scenario. We need to maintain and preserve our cultures, our regional customs, and communities wherever possible. And under that guidance, we are there to solve some vital issues such as mentioned above, which must be managed and decided globally because they have global implications. We must find a global collaborative and corruption-free decision-making model without giving up local cultures. These are the 10 points where we need to start. Solving these issues will make the world a significantly nicer place. We as a global community owe it to each other and to our future generations to solve these problems now and to prepare for a society that can sustain itself well into the future. Today, we must begin a new chapter in human development. Today, we must inspire everyone to become part of a decisive trend to change and fix the world's problems. Today, we must begin a new renaissance of global life with global responsibility. Today, we must depart from conflict, dogmatic division, and the evil virus of hypocrisy. There's only one way forward. We all know what the proper road to the future is. Let's walk on that road together today, all of us. And as a full collaborating, peaceful and responsible human society, it begins with us today, right here in this room. Thank you for your attention.